1. Belfast, 1989. To ask for a black and tan was tantamount to suicide in this Catholic establishment. So Terence Patrick Nolan, or Terry to his mates, took another deep swallow of his room-temperature pint of half and half, and continued to observe the man he'd been sent by MI5 to remove from the living almost 11 months earlier. Cigarette smoke hung in the air like a smog of 1950s London. Not that it bothered Terry. He was adding to the haze in Barry's pub with his own chain-smoking. It still amazed him that his cover as a freelance photojournalist had held up for as long as it had. For him, there were no fancy James Bond gadgets, no Walther PPK to produce and save the day, aside from the Browning high-power carefully taped under the wardrobe in his boarding-house room. Hell, he was even using his real name. 2 years ago, after he was recruited to MI5 from 14 Intelligence Company, commonly known as the Det in the British Army, the powers that be had insisted he build a cover based on his real background. Their reasoning was that not only did he have excellent lineage, but it would also be hard to screw up during idle conversation or, God forbid, interrogation. The only thing that had been scrubbed from his background was any mention of him being in the British Army. So he had morphed into Terry Nolan, a photojournalist who let it be known that he had some sympathy for the Irish struggle to kick the British out of the 6 counties of Northern Ireland. So here he sat, back against the wall, in the far corner of the busy pub, watching Kieran Martin, whose Bristol pub bombing had resulted in the deaths of 38 people, 24 of whom were teenagers returning home from a school outing. The Prime Minister had vowed to bring the perpetrators to justice, and over many months of interrogations, threats, and in some cases payoffs, they had gotten a name. The problem was then finding the perpetrator Kieran Martin, who had gone to ground. And that was where Terry had come in. Now, 2 streets off the Falls Road, in this second-rate bar that smelled of slightly rancid beer and sweat, and where the likes of Martin were considered heroes, Terry had finally found the bastard. He doubted the man had paid for a drink in the 20 months since the attack. Terry would make sure that the glass of whiskey Martin had just finished with a flourish would be one of his last. After seeing his quarry enter an hour earlier, Terry had made an excuse to the others at his table and headed for the bathroom. What they didn't see was the phone call he made to another MI5 operative who was acting as his cutout under the guise of a lady friend, asking when she was going to join him for their mythical date. She, of course, had feigned a headache and immediately passed on his location to others tasked with carrying out Martin's removal. He returned to his table, complaining about how the girl he had met at the library while researching his book, a good Catholic girl, of course, had stood him up. There were a few joking comments about him not getting his end away by the lads at the table, and he was quickly dispatched to buy a round of whiskies to help soothe their collective sorrows at his loss. Approaching the bar, he just couldn't resist the temptation and eased his way through the collective crowd until he was standing shoulder to shoulder with Kieran Martin. He raised his voice over the hubbub, laying on his best thick Manchester accent, and ordered 5 doubles of Jameson. He couldn't help but smile slightly as Martin's head spun in his direction at the sound of his voice. "What the fuck might an Englishman be doing in these parts?" he hissed. "Why, what's it to you, mister?" replied Terry. "I'll tell you what it's to me, you British bastard, right before I blow the back of your fucking head off. Now answer the fucking question." Terry looked down as he felt the pistol jammed under his ribcage. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all.